So we're back, and in this episode we're going to build out one of the last pieces of the waterfront that we need to do to complete the waterfront pretty much around the entire downtown. And that area is called Mission Bay. And in real life there is a lot going on here, but keeping theme with the rest of our city and series, we're going to scale this down and just sort of include the most important points sort of thing. So this area is going to include like the main hospital for the city, which is huge, and like sporting facilities, lots of cool looking hotels. And we're going to start here with this little wee like water channel or inlet that comes in here near the downtown train station. So let's lay out a few roads here and then get into the build. So as you can see, we've got a really basic grid pattern here, which is something we don't see anywhere else in San Francisco whatsoever. That really couldn't be further from the truth. The whole city is on a grid, but this part of it here is on a slightly different angle to the rest. And I guess the predominant feature here is the grid pattern changes where it meets the highway. So we've got all those highways and roads in place now. Let's start to put these buildings in. These ones around the channel here look to be hotels. Now, without knowing too much about San Francisco's history, I'm going to hazard a guess and say this was quite an industrial area down here to begin with. It slowly transitioned into this sort of area for hotels or a tourism area because of its proximity to the waterfront. Probably also the sporting facilities around here. So we've got Oracle Park that's also very close. And later in this episode, we're going to install another sporting facility that is very close to this area. But anyway, before we get into putting any of those buildings down, I need to get all of this infrastructure in the right place. So this highway here, I had coming in initially, needs a little bit of work. The reason I'm really reworking this intersection is because I need to gain enough height underneath this new highway here to put some buildings and stuff in. I want all of the buildings flowing right underneath the highway here. It's keeping in tune with what we see on Google Earth. And it's kind of funny, every time I rework or redo an old interchange or intersection, the new method that I come up with is always much simpler than the original way that I'd done it. And I'm kind of like, why didn't I think of that to start with? It's really such a paradox. Like, the more thought you put into something, the worse it could be. Like, really? I put so much work into everything. It really pains me to think of just relaxing all of that and sort of going with the flow, but sometimes maybe that's the right thing to do. And I can assure you that's going to take me plenty of work to actually understand completely, but it's worth thinking about. Maybe some of you guys have heard of the KISS saying, keep it simple, stupid, and I think that definitely applies here. So anyway, next I want to clean some of these intersections up with the intersection marking tool and node controller and get this sort of all in place and detailed properly before I move on to finishing these buildings and detailing them. And I want to mention really quickly that if any of you guys feel the pain of trying to bring a 6-lane road into 2 single lanes, I'm going to epitomize that right here with what I'm trying to do. Yes, I understand that I should probably upgrade the highway to at least a 2 or 3 lane road so it's a bit more fluid, but they get too wide and I don't want to use node controller to make 3 lanes absurdly narrow so that the traffic doesn't flow through it properly. So I'm trying to compromise here and flow this from 3 lanes into 1 with a selection of different mods and a bit of creativity. So we got this really unique piece of land here between the highway and the train tracks that I'm pretty much just relying straight on Google Earth here, to be completely honest. And if this was a city that I was building without any influence from Google Earth, I'd be pretty stumped as to what to build here. It's a small and very odd shaped piece of land, and following Google Earth here, they've just curved a little road around here, and there's a whole lot of like very samey apartments along here, or what looks like apartments anyway. And all of it is following that train track, the curve of the train track. So aside from those buildings looking like apartments or duplexes, my next best guess is because of all of these car parks that are around this area in real life, they're definitely sort of some style of apartment. And I'm picking that they're probably on a pedestrian only road, or they at the very least do not have individual garages or sheds. So they're probably allocated 1 or 2 parking spots here for their particular apartment. Next, we're going to gently caress through some brutal lag. My computer is not showing any signs of flames or anything like that, so I'm okay guys, don't have to worry about me. But I do worry about you. Do not click off the video, it only lasts for a little wee bit. We've got this area here where this little wee canal goes underneath the highway, and everything that I'm building here I'm trying to follow as closely as I can from real life. But in saying that, they're not in exactly the same spot. So for instance, we see tennis courts down in this area, we see these really sort of beautiful round areas on the edge of the canal or the little bay, but because I've had to squeeze that scale down here, yeah, it's not exactly how we'd see it in real life. And if you've followed the series, you've heard me say that 1,000 times before, but when I really think about it, I think this is really the heart of the series for me. I don't get to do too much variation when I'm rebuilding a city like for like, or, you know, in the fashion that I am here in this series. But because it's not scaled 100%, it gives me the opportunity to have my own influence as well, which, you know, for me, that really helps me stay passionate. I think it really all comes down to what inspires us as City Skylines players. You know, for me, I've always been inspired by cities that, you know, take inspiration from a real life London or New York, for instance, but then, you know, put their own spin on it, have their own areas. And I think there's just an overall vibe that we have to meet for certain areas that leaves a bit of space for some personal creativity. Now, in saying all of that, cities just can be so gosh darn predictable. Earlier in the episode I touched on how I thought this area may be old reclaimed industrial land that's sort of been turned into more high class hotels. Now firstly, I could be very well wrong with that assumption. Secondly, if I was building this from scratch, this is exactly the type of area that I would expect around a waterfront, especially this close to downtown. We are within a close proximity to a lot of cool stuff that goes on within San Francisco in this location. So naturally, we see hundreds upon hundreds of hotel rooms here available for rent. All very nice looking, all with a beautiful view. They all have really easy and user-friendly access to public service. As fun as it is to build, it's all just so bloody predictable. It's not until we look a little bit closer till we see some more unusual things. We have got a pretty diverse looking waterfront edge down here. There's some really nice walkways here along some natural style embankments, as well as some more sort of man-made boardwalks or waterfront promenades. And my favourite part of all of that is the natural embankments. It's a little bit of a surprise to see those down here, and it's a really nice little touch, I think. Ivania's awesome wooden wharfs to the rescue here, and I'm also using Grey Flame's really cool looking mossy rocks here to create an edge to the canal. I'm a massive fan of these nature areas as close to downtown as possible, and this was just a joy to make. I really enjoyed this. And with the rest of the area, I just want to make a really simple boardwalk that's functional, so we're going to have real pedestrian paths along here that move citizens along. This block that we're detailing here is going to be apartments, and if you're wealthy or lucky enough to own one of these apartments, you are also going to have access to one parking spot for a boat down in your own little personal harbour. This is indeed one very wealthy area of San Francisco. I would expect these apartments and duplexes to go for between $5 to $10 million. And let's be honest, if you've got enough money to have a really big boat or a yacht, then you're probably in line to own one of these places, you know. Now, one thing we see a lot of in real life in this area as well that I was pretty keen to represent is construction or new development. I really haven't got any new development or construction in the city at all at this point. And if we want to keep this as realistic as possible, we're going to have a lot of new development around the place. Cities never stop developing and changing. Let's also consider that there's also a lot of financial potential in this area. This is a developer's dream. The initial outlay here to build a hotel might be $10, $20, $30 million, I'm not sure, but the potential for income for the future would be massive. So we've got a couple of apartment buildings under construction here. There's also lots of construction props like cranes and pallets with materials and equipment on them, and I've also included a temporary looking rock across the waterfront. Maybe this gets changed out for something more permanent in future. I use the mod procedural objects to manipulate a lot of buildings in the city, and because of that they lose their functionality. Well, I wanted to make sure that the hospital we placed down here was fully functional. So initially I tried here with the vanilla one, and then I tried to sort of hide it or change the look of it with, you know, other buildings or whatever. But eventually I surrendered to the Steam Workshop and got this really nice looking hospital. I think it's actually from New York, but in any case it fits our city here much better than what I was trying to do. And once that's placed down, that's it. No extra roads, walkways, buildings or car parks. Just a functional hospital within City Skylines. And I'm happy as. And now I'm going to go on a bit of a rant to justify it. Normally, I would feel really guilty about not detailing something as important as a hospital, but what am I really gaining from detailing it? It's working in game, the building looks fantastic, just leave it bloody be. And with that, my micro rant is over. Now, next we're building the Chase Center, which looks to be some sort of indoor sporting venue to me. I tried a bunch of different sort of stadiums or whatever, but eventually I end up using Ali Targs's Wellington or Cake Tin Stadium that he made for my New Zealand series almost 2 years ago now. Now, there's two reasons why I've used this. The facade is pretty perfect. It's obviously that round shape that we need, and it was also the right shape to add this roof, which was pretty vital. This is a fully covered in sports arena, and I've used surface networks to create that roof. In real life, that roof is quite white. It matches very much the colour of the facade of the building, which is a light grey at best. And rather than use a whole bunch of little white decals or whatever, or props to create that white roof, I'm using one of the light grey landscape decals from the workshop, because it's one massive decal instead of potentially 50 or 100. It's also got a little bit of texture and movement in the pattern to make it look like it's a realistic roof that's maybe been weathered a little bit or whatever. So I turned that decal into procedural objects, and being honest, I found a completely new function with procedural objects that helped me put this decal in place. So I've used procedural objects for, well over 2,000 hours, and I'm still finding new things about it. Basically, I've added new vertices to this decal so that I can shape it round with, pretty much ease. Of course, I also learn a lot from watching all of the other wicked City Skylines YouTubers that you guys watch. A shout out to all the YouTube City Skylines hustlers out there. Much love, my brothers and sisters. I know exactly how much work you put into everything and you are appreciated. So anyway, let's finish off this indoor stadium with the writing on the top which says the Chase Center. I'm using just a plain white billboard here with the procedural objects text customization function, putting in the appropriate writing with the correct color, and then I blow a massive car tire up and turn it blue to create a little logo. So what I'm doing here is inspired by exactly what we see in real life. We have got a sub-level here that's probably about maybe 8 meters or 25 to 30 feet above ground level that runs around a good half of the stadium. I'm picking that this probably is access into the higher levels of the stadium, but it's also created this space underneath that sub-level for commercial spaces. So in game I start by placing down those buildings on the ground level. I'm also trying to be conscious of leaving areas for stairs up to that sub level, and I want it to look like real life as much as I possibly can. And to try and animate this and integrate it into City Skylines as much as I can, I've also added a lot of pedestrian paths going up across this sub level through the stadium and maybe just out to the other side of the block just to get foot traffic walking through here. I've also tried to make it look like some of the paths are going through elevators or lifts. Some of the paths are also going through like market areas or stalls outside of the stadium, and I'm also going to put in a cube service here that turns all of this into a real match day stadium. I can choose which day of the week we can have heaps of people flood through here and spend lots of money, watch their favourite team get hammered, and go home dejected after spending $50 odd. And then absolutely full to the brim with optimism, we'll turn back up next weekend and do it all again. It's not insanity, it's just another day in the life of supporting our favourite sporting team. I am so happy to be back in San Francisco, and for the next couple of weeks we are going to focus on building some pretty important areas within the city. A big thank you to you legends for watching my episode today. I spent hours making this footage because I have amazing comments from you guys, and I am absolutely 100% dedicated to making footage that you guys want to watch. You guys could help me out by giving me an upwards thumb or by pressing a button that floods your timeline with my footage. Peace out, you legends. I love you.